Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming, and you're at home. Um, my name is Dave Verbin. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves in just a moment. Come on in. Come on in. Um, I am an associate with an organization called In Control Wisconsin. You've heard of In Control as an nonprofit that supports self-direction and self-determination across Wisconsin. We provide education and training, consulting. We advocate on behalf of progressive policy. We really, our mission is to help people have access to the kind of services and supports that they need to live their lives in the community, right? We're all about community supported living. And today we're going to talk to you about a new tool, a new learning platform that we've just completed that we think can be a really nice tool for people with disabilities and their direct care workers to use together. It's all about, we're going to show you what that is today and encourage you to check it out and share it with your friends and colleagues. So I'm going to pass the mic around and invite my colleagues to introduce themselves.
My name is Cindy Desch. I work for Assurance SD. We're a fiscal agent in Wisconsin, and I also am on the board for In Control.
My name is Dawn Rainin, and I'm an instructional designer. Used to live in Wisconsin. Now I'm living in Colorado, but I'm back here for this conference. And I helped prepare these materials, so I'm anxious to share them with you.
I'm Christy Schooneman. I'm a self-advocate leader, and I got pulled into doing this presentation somehow.
Oh, man. Okay. I could probably have everybody go around. We really, hopefully we can make this conversational. We'd love to get some feedback from all of you. But like I say, we want to work towards showing you what this site looks like. Let me just give you a couple of bits of background. We call this Caring Across Cultures, right? And as I said, it's a website, a web-based set of classes that can help people with disabilities and their direct care workers get to know each other better, essentially. It's all about helping people build stronger relationships. So we designed this for use by self-advocates, people with disabilities or older adults, direct care workers, family members, even agency providers, IRIS consultants or family care team members. We think any one of them could benefit from the material that are in these classes. Why do we do this? As we listened to self-advocates, family members, providers, direct care workers, one of the things we learned was that having, a good trusting relationship, with your direct care workers, between a direct care worker and the person they support, really enhances the experience. It leads to better quality of care, of service and support received, better retention, better satisfaction for both the employee, the direct care worker, and the person and the employer. So we also learned that while there are some good resources for training and education for direct care workers, there's not so much support available for developing those relationships. So again, what we tried to do here is collect information about how do you do that. If I'm a person with a disability who has direct care workers supporting me in my home, my job, and in my community, what kind of support could I get to help me build a relationship with this worker who may be very different from me, might be somebody I don't know until they come into my home, walk into the door. And what we learned is that can be a very challenging thing. We've tried to create some easy to use tools that can help people do that. And the stuff that's in these classes are things that we learned from self-advocates and family members and direct workers. We asked people, well, what do you do? How do you connect and build relationship and build trust with your workers? And they told us. And so we use that as the basis for providing this content. So we're going to look at exactly what the website is in a little bit. We just wanted to give you a little bit of background first. Oops. Oh, that's us. We did that already. So again, we think that this tool can be used by people with disabilities, by family members or advocates, direct care workers, even provider agencies rather. Okay, so we want to take a few minutes before we show it to you to kind of talk about why we call it caring across cultures. So, and that has to do with like just what it is that makes people different, right? So when I say we want to talk about our different identities or identity, what comes to mind when I say what's your identity? What do you think of? Anybody? Yeah, there you go. Sure. Yeah. Values, things I believe are important. Yeah. So one way to think about that is imagine that you and I just met and we want to sit down for a little bit and get to know each other. You know, we might ask you questions. What kind of questions might you ask me? I mean, ask you where you're from. Tell me about your family. Do you have family? You know, what do you like to do? Maybe I'll ask you if you work, what your job is. Maybe it gets a little deeper and we start talking about things like values or do you belong to a church? You know, that kind of thing. All of those things are elements of identity and they go into who we are, right? And how we interact with others. So identity is basically all the things that make us unique, right? And some of them we see, like you can look at me and see some things about my identity. You make some assumptions about my race. You look at my skin tone. You make some assumptions about my gender. You hear my voice and you probably assume that I learned to speak English in Wisconsin, right? My accent and the way I speak. So all of those things go into our identity and many more. And that sort of brings us to the iceberg. So when I say iceberg, when you think about an iceberg, what do you think of? What's unique about an iceberg? Yeah, right. You can only see a little bit. Yeah, most of it is beneath the surface. So maybe you've heard this before. It's a fairly straightforward metaphor, but kind of a neat way to think about identity when we're talking about getting to know each other across differences. So if you imagine that each of us is like an iceberg, you can only see a little bit of our identities, right? The stuff that's above the waterline, or in this case, just on the outer shell. Most of the things that make me, me, and make each of you, you can't see, right? I can't see. They're within you. They're things you believe, experiences that you've had. So again, when you look at me, hey, you can assume some things, right? Or you might assume some things about my identity. As again, you're going to make an assumption about my race, about my gender, my age, you know, more or less. I'm either older than you, less younger than you, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of other things you don't know, like where was I born? What are my hobbies? What religion do I practice? What makes me sad or what makes me happy? You know, am I a parent? What am I in a relationship? Am I married? Do I have a partner? Have I ever had a really bad experience? Have I ever been in a bad accident or had a serious illness and spent a lot of time in the hospital? You don't know any of those things about me. So if you want to know me better, what do you have to do? Yeah. So that's it. That's the payoff. The reason we sort of go through this exercise is just to remind us that there's so much that we don't know about each other. And the only way we can know is to ask, to listen, right? To develop enough trust with somebody so that we can talk about things. Like you and I are just sitting down now, and I'll tell you where I was born or where I'm from, but it might take a little while before I perhaps talk about what makes me happy or sad, or if I had a bad experience with something, right? The deeper those experiences or the deeper those aspects are, the more we have to trust each other. And then so that brings us back to where we started, why we think this is important. As I'm sure most of you know or have experienced directly or indirectly, you know, providing direct care, receiving direct care, whether that's supportive home care around chores and my living my life, or whether it's personal care where I need assistance with eating, dressing, using the toilet, activities, personal activities, that's really pretty intimate stuff. We have to be pretty close. I'm relying on you to do things for me that I have difficulty doing for myself. So it's really by nature, it's pretty intimate. There's a lot of trust implied in it. And what we believe to be true is that the better we know each other, the more I can trust you, the more comfortable I'll be with receiving service from you, and vice versa. If I'm a direct care worker, knowing each other will allow me to provide the best possible service and for both of us to feel safe in a relationship that's really important and can be fragile, right? So that's the whole idea. If we don't know what's under the water with each other, we can really get into trouble, right? You can imagine if not knowing each other very well, not understanding how we're different, how we have different beliefs.
It's currently 1.
Sorry. That's the end of my, right? No, it's my cue to go to work. I'm a crossing guard, so that I don't worry, my corner's covered today. But normally at this time, I'd be dashing over to Franklin Elementary in Madison and getting the kids home from school safely. But so you didn't know that about me, right? So where was I? Oh, just think about it. And I'm sure I'll ask you to think about your own experience and then invite Christy and perhaps others to share. But where you may have had experiences where you had some kind of tension or conflict with somebody that might have been because you were coming from a very different place. Like maybe I said something that you found to be sort of offensive or hurtful or felt bad, right? And but I may have done that from a place of, from an innocent place, not with any intent to harm you, but just because I have a different way of speaking. I might use language that that is offensive to you, but I grew up with it, or vice versa, right? That's a common one, the kind of language we use, the way we talk about people or about things or activities, be really different depending on our families and our experiences. And so I might use language that bothers you or vice versa. All of those things can happen when we don't really know what's beneath the waterline, so to speak. And that can lead to conflict, it can lead to tension. And it can also lead to sort of mistrust. So if we want to think about it in the terms of, in the context of a caregiver relationship, I'm going to give this to you, Christy. You want to share your reflections well,
I'm winging this. So yeah, I've had experiences with caregivers. It's a very tricky relationship to get established. It's a new person coming into your personal space, doing very personal things. I have to be able to trust them, know what they're doing at all times. Just have total confidence that they're not messing with any of my property or stealing from me, which has happened. Or getting into my money, which has also happened, making me buy them things. It's just, yeah, it's a very complex, deep relationship when you have someone personally coming into your space and helping you with everyday tasks.
I'll ask first and then, can you talk about a little bit, you shared this with us a while back, how the other thing that happens is a new worker that comes in doesn't know what your experience is necessarily, and that what you might be feeling inside.
They may say or do something that I react negatively to, and they look at me like, why you act so negatively? Because I was treated bad before. So you doing that same action is bringing back old feelings. And that's just how I cope with things is, experiences.
Are you gonna?
I just wanted to ask you, kind of going back to why we created these materials in the first place, is that you might be in a position where you have a direct care worker who's very good at what they do. they can do all the technical stuff and offering you support. But if there's a problem with the relationship in terms of how you communicate with each other, you know, are you in a position where you might, even though they can do the work, you might, do you let them go? If
If you, I, I hate to let them go if I know they can do the work, but I need to, again, be able to trust you beyond just doing the work. I need you to be able to build some kind of relationship with me. I know a lot of care agencies frown upon like building relationships with your caregivers and clients. But again, when you're doing very personal things, you need that relationship to be able to trust one another.
It's really, it's unique work, right? I mean, it's really hard to look at any other kind of work in our society that's quite like that. This combination of intimacy and that sort of, you have to have, it's not about a personal relationship, but you have to have a relationship that's trusting enough for it to be safe and effective. Go ahead. Did you want anything to add anything?
No.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I have to trust you. You have to trust me.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways too. If, you know, if any of you are or have been direct care workers, you know, there's a lot of responsibility. You're going into someone's home or going into someone's space, someone's community space. And there can be a certain amount of vulnerability there too. Again, as a worker, you know, I'm coming into, you might be very different from me and I might not, I have a different way of understanding, you know, what your life is like. Maybe I got a different way of thinking about just what disability means and what it means to be self-directed, right? To have choice, to make decisions. So that might make it difficult for me to provide you the care that you need or the support that you need if I have a different understanding of who you are and what you need. Anybody want to share any thoughts about maybe a situation that you've experienced in whatever role as a employer, family member, worker, where you maybe struggled with building a trusting relationship?
I'm an Iris nurse and I had to go into someone's home. And due to the cultural differences between us, it was very difficult, not only communication wise, but I knew nothing of their culture. And so building that trust between the two of us, trying to get over the language barriers. I didn't realize in their culture, taking off shoes at the front door was a big thing. And I walked in and sat down without taking off my shoes. And I didn't realize until I got a message from my manager, I had highly offended them. And so it was on me, not my participant, to look into their culture a lot more and gain that experience so that the next time I went out to see them, I could make them feel a little bit more comfortable. And I made sure that I had an interpreter there that spoke not only their language, but their dialect. Because I found out that among the Hmong population, because it was a Hmong person, that there were multiple dialects. So I found out what dialect they spoke, and we got a interpreter that could speak their dialect. So that wound up making them much more comfortable. And over the course of the years, we got to build that trust and got to be very comfortable with each other. So yeah, just, you know, if you're not sure, do research, and you can find just a little bit of knowledge goes a long way.
Thank you, Susan. I think one of the themes of the materials that we have, and can all speak to this too, is about curiosity, right? When is to understand that there's difference, whether we can see it or not. And often we can see it. We really, it might be a language difference. We might realize, obviously, we're two different people in many ways. But even if we can't, if we can just come with a sense of curiosity, if we don't have any knowledge yet, and just ask, or at least be deferential to, like, I want to know who you are and how I can best get to know you, etc. That's kind of the theme of the materials. Like, that's really what we're driving for, ways to help people just develop curiosity and recognize when they might be experiencing some tension that's because of difference. Like, good example, and that it became pretty obvious what that was in your example. And as Christy said, sometimes it's not so obvious. It might just be, people are feeling a little something, or
Or I know I've had the experience of, if when I let a caregiver go, are they going to retaliate against me because they're mad that I fired them?
yeah. So there's a lot of layers to that.
Yeah.
That's
So many layers.
other comments or thoughts about? Yeah, please.
Christy, I don't necessarily know if this is directly for you, and I apologize if it's putting you on the spot, but I'm wondering, how do you know how do you develop that trust, and when do you know you've established that trust? And then what benefits do you see in your maybe demeanor, personal life, however you might want to define it? Like, what benefits do you get when you do find a caregiver that you trust?
You get really good at trusting your gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And that's okay. What was the second part?
Like, what benefits do you see do you feel maybe once you find a caregiver that you trust?
Once I found a caregiver that I trust, I can be totally myself without hesitation, without wondering if they're going to judge me. Yeah, I'm just able to be completely me.
Thanks for that question. Anyone else, other thoughts or stories you want to share about? Yeah?
So on the other end of that, as a caregiver, I've got multiple clients. I have a daughter with some disabilities under the family care program, and I also am a caregiver under. I only have a limited amount of clients, but through different programs or whatever. And I could tell you the caregiver gets a lot out of it too. If it's a really good caregiver and that is the caregiver's goal, then you'll know it. And they feel it on the other end too. I've established some really good relationships that are lifelong relationships. And I know that they're lifelong relationships, and so do my clients. So
I love that. So as a worker, just to there's the benefit is the job is more satisfying for you. The experience is better. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the assumptions that we made. We know that the workforce crisis is real, and that finding direct care workers can be very challenging, right? Challenging, tough job, pays not great. There's a lot of challenges. And one of the real goals of us doing this is to create another tool that could provide something that will help people stay, help workers have more satisfaction with the job as well as the employer receiving, the best quality of care and having reliability, and, not having lowering the amount of worry they have about whether a worker's going to show up, all those things that are really important on a day-to-day. We think that, again, a strong, trusting relationship can minimize those problems and improve the quality of life for people. Okay. Anyone want to add anything before we kind of transition to the thing? Dawn, you want to take this? Yeah, I think so. So what we're going to do now. Oh, I'll put this up. Yes, we're gonna move to showing you the Caring Across Cultures tool. Okay, so again, just real quickly, Dawn is our instructional designer. She is the one who has primarily been responsible for putting all the content together and shepherding the rest of the team. And we all contributed, but Dawn was the one that kept this project going. And And so, you know, we want to give her a chance to sort of walk you through it so you can see what the tools are. Again, this is something that's available on their website. There's cards on each of your tables that have the web address with the QR code. We'll make sure you get that before you go. And the website has 4 courses that people can take. They're self-paced, you know, go through them at your own speed. A number of documents that'll be useful that Dawn will demonstrate for you. And we really think that these materials can be beneficial to direct care workers, to people with disabilities who are employing direct care workers, to IRIS consultants, family care teams, anybody who's a provider. And they're available for anyone to use. So there you go. I'll hand it over to you, Dawn. Are you ready to give them the tour? You want to, you can use the other one? Okay. We're going to leave you with that one.
Sure. Okay, so you can see here that Caring Across Cultures, our project is on the In Control Wisconsin website. And one of the first things we wanted to point out is that we wanted to make it available in Spanish as well. And so this toggle up here in the left-hand corner, you can click on the down arrow and select the ES for Espanol. And then the whole site then is in Spanish. So we're excited to have that accessible. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put it back into English. And then what am I doing wrong?
Okay.
I think I'm trying to scroll down.
Oh, let's just do. Yeah, it might be 2 fingers.
Oh, okay.
Maybe safer.
Okay, so as you scroll down on when you land on the web page, there's some basic information that Dave has already covered about who the materials are for, why we develop them, how can you use them, and what we offer. So one of the first things that we wanted to point out is that in home and community-based service programs, it's kind of like it has its own language. I know when I first started working in the industry and everybody was talking about the waiver, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what are we, what are you wavering from? So we thought that it was really important for people who have been working in these programs for a long time, if they're used to talking about things in a certain way, some of the terms we use might not make sense. Some people are very, like, for example, one of the resources we have here is about talking about the difference between person first and identity first language. And we found that people have a very strong personal preference. Some people don't care which one is used, and others have a very strong preference. And so we thought that it best to use a mixture of those 2 languages so that we're showing respect for the variety that there is and the ways people want to talk about disability. And then the other one is with all the different programs, there's different, you can't say this is the rule and this is how it is for everyone. So depending on what program you're in, employer might mean something different. And we just wanted everyone in our materials, we wanted everyone to know that when we say employer, we're talking about the person who is receiving services. Sometimes in a program, the fiscal employment agent is also considered a co-employer or something. And we're like, no, these materials are about improving the relationship between the direct care worker and the person that they are providing services to. So that's some feedback that we got right away about some of our materials is you're using identity first language. Shouldn't you be using person first? And we're like, well, actually, some people really prefer what we use. So that we thought that before people dive into the courses and look and read our materials, they should know the terms that we're using. Okay, I'm going to skip over courses for just a second and talk a little bit about our library. One of the things, again, in terms of accessibility that we wanted to point out is that not everybody likes to read. And some people learn better by listening instead of reading. And so there's a button here you can click that we have a video that explains how to use different apps or extensions for a browser so you could like highlight material in the course and the screen reader will read it for you. So that's an option. And I can show you. I just learned how to do this. Like if you want, this obviously is pretty easy to read. It's short, but the idea is that you can highlight what you want to be read. And then if you have the app installed on or extension.
How to access our content in an audio format if that is best for you. This tutorial is designed for audio learners as well as anyone.
So that is a nice option for people who don't want to read as much. How do I close that? There we go. Then in the library itself, if you we have a variety of different documents. You'll see some of them here, like this, how I interact with people. It's an activity. So it has a bunch of questions that you could do on your own and then discuss it with somebody else to learn about each other. And then we also just have documents that are, some are specifically for workers, like knowing what your rights are, what your responsibilities are. And the same goes for employers or participants, like helpful information like that. And all of these work they're all PDFs. So when you click on it, you can read it on the screen, but you can now also have the option to print it if you would like. So. Okay, now then the other thing I'd like to show you are the courses. There's 4 of them. And you can do them in any order, but they start out, if you do them in order, it starts out very basic. And I'll show you just how the navigation works. So this first one is an overview of direct care work. We've talked with some people that thought this would be great for like provider agencies if they have people interested in perhaps working as a direct care worker, but they don't know a lot about it. This would be a great resource to send them to say, check this out. You'll get an idea of what you could expect in the job. So when you come into the course, this is the title page, and you can either just click on the button to start, or you can also scroll down and get a table of contents that you can see what's in the course. So if I click on start the course, this is what they'll all look like. They'll have a menu on the side. The title in blue is the title of the course, and then the lessons, each lessons are below that. And we're in the first one, and you can see that there's a progress bar in the blue section here that says 0% complete. And as you go through the course, you scroll down, you might see in that over here in this first circle here, the further I go down, it fills in, like it's showing that I'm completing that lesson. There's lots of different activities. This one here is like I said, it would be a good introduction for somebody who's never done direct care work before. And you can click on the pictures and it'll tell you what the different tasks are. And there's more independent living tasks. And then we add, in some cases, we have questions to think about. Just so instead of just going through a course real quick, we're encouraging people to take a minute and think, is this something that I would like to do? Do I like to help people? Do I like to take care of people? And then when you get to the bottom of a lesson, there's two different ways you could continue. There's the button, the blue section at the bottom where you just click on that and that'll take you to lesson 2. Or you could also click over here on the side, and you can go around in any order, jump around in the courses. One thing I want to make sure to point out is what's really important for us is to get feedback. This is new training material that we think will really help people build better relationships. But we like to see if we hit the mark. So your feedback is very important. At the end of, get through this last session or lesson, at the end of each course, there is a place where you can provide your feedback. One thing we want to know is, like I said earlier, home and community-based services programs have their own language, kind of need to know the jargon. And so we really wanted to make it easy for people that aren't familiar with the programs. We want to make it easy to understand. So that's one thing we want to know. And of course, we want to know if what you learned was helpful, if you did learn something. And then we want to get an idea of who you are, so that we can get a good idea of who our audience is. And these feedback forms are anonymous. We can't see who leaves the comments, but we want to know, like, was there something you really liked? Was there something you thought that was missing? Like, it would have been really great if you would have put this in this course too. So we really encourage people to provide their feedback. Okay, I go back to the website. I want to show you just what the other courses are about. Talk about a little bit. So the reason that we thought this course was important in understanding your beliefs about disability is I don't think people realize that they don't realize like that they do have beliefs about disability until it kind of confronts them unexpectedly. And So we wanted people to think about how they feel about disability, because your beliefs, how you feel about something, is going to affect your behavior. So a good example, let's see, which one is it? In this lesson, we have a series of questions. Here is like, the question is, where should people with disabilities live? Now, I would imagine that some people are just like, wherever they want. What's, why are you even asking that question? Depending on your life experience, where a person is from, the culture they grew up in, they might come from a culture where the belief is that people with disabilities should be in a building that's just for them, that's specifically for people with disabilities, that they should be living separate. So we want people to have these realizations like, oh, I just didn't even think about that. And to have that realization, then, like, how is my belief affecting my behavior? Like, if a direct care worker comes from a culture where they do believe that people with disabilities should be in a separate place, how is that going to affect their behavior toward that person? Like, they don't really think that the person belongs in their own home, like they should be somewhere else. So it's important for people to really understand how they think about disability, because as we talk about in the next lesson, why does it matter what I believe in my head? And the reason it matters is because how you think affects how you act and how you behave, how you treat other people. So you need to understand not only how you yourself feel about something, but you also need to understand that not everybody thinks the same way that you do. So you might run into somebody that thinks differently, and you have to there has to be that realization that it's how they feel is not right or wrong. It's just different than me. I'll show you. So we talk about that, beliefs about disability, and then we talk a little bit about what the employer expects. And with anything, when you're talking about people, you can't say, there isn't like a rule that says all employers are going to think like this and have these expectations. But there are some basic things that most people in a self-directed program would be expecting. And those would include, like, they want to be seen as a whole person. Don't just look at me as my disability. I'm a whole person. Get to know me as a whole person. And also, yes, I need support, but support my independence as well. So then the Understanding Our Differences course gets at some of the topics we've already touched on today about the iceberg analogy, the identity, sense of identity. What can you see? What can't you see? And then the idea of culture. A lot of times, we think of culture as, like Dave said earlier, what you can see, but there's a lot that you can't. And you really need to understand yourself and how you are and how you interact with the world, so that when you encounter somebody who doesn't act or think the same way, that you understand it's a cultural difference. some examples. Should I play this? Oh, okay. I don't want to, yeah, I guess I can try it.
Placed a basket of sweets under a tree and asked the children to stand a few hundred feet away. He told them that whoever reaches the basket first gets all the sweets. Then he said, ready, set, go. The children held each other's hands, ran to the basket together, and divided up the sweets between them all. When the anthropologist asked why, they said, how can one be happy when all the others are sad?
So this little excerpt here of story is meant to help you realize, like, well, as this question asks, did the behavior of the children surprise you? Or were you like, I mean, I don't know about you, but growing up in the United States, it's about competition. And if somebody says ready, set, go, you know, people are going to race for the candy, and hopefully you're the one that wins. These kids had a totally different perspective. It was the culture that they grew up in that dictated their behavior. So along those lines of what we can't see, one of the things that we can't see about other people is how they communicate. What is their preference for communicating? And in general, there's two different styles, direct and indirect. And that is a cultural difference that can really have an impact on a relationship. And to know that about the other person is very helpful. Are you the kind of person, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head here. I can personally, I can say I am an indirect communicator. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. If I'm at, let's say, at somebody's house and they're like, are you cold? You know, and I think if everybody else is fine, I'm not going to say that I'm cold. So, and then there are other people that like might not even wait for somebody to ask them if they're cold. They'll just say, geez, is it cold in here or what? Can we turn up the heat? You know, that's the difference. And if you're interacting with somebody who has a different style of communication than you, that can cause some conflict and differences. And so we're going through these examples to help you see how these differences can come up. And lastly, we get to the last course. And it's about, okay, we're human. We're bound to have differences that are going to make us uncomfortable with each other. We talk about how do you know when you're having a conflict? Even the fact that, did you know, like, just even if only one person is aware that there's a problem, it's still a conflict, even if the other person isn't aware. Because if they're upset about something, like somebody's, let's say the direct care worker said something to their employer and the employer was hurt by it, but they don't say anything. Maybe they're an indirect communicator. Maybe the direct care worker is a direct communicator. They would have preferred that the employer say, you know what, that really hurt my feelings. But if the employer doesn't, then how the employer now interacts with that employee, their direct care worker, is going to be affected by that hurt. So even though both people, I think a lot of times when we think of a conflict, we think of two people like they know that there's a problem, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And so what this course does is talks about recognizing the differences and when there's a conflict, and why is it hard for some of us to really deal with conflict? And then the last part of the course then is about different skills that people can use to build a better, stronger relationship. Self-awareness is a big one. And curiosity is my favorite. A lot of the research I did said curiosity is a superpower when it comes to relationships. And then if you're going to ask questions because you're curious, you should also be ready to listen. Don't make assumptions about what you think the other person is going to say. Another aspect is being empathetic. And we talk about the difference between empathy and sympathy and how they're different. And then the last lesson before you get to the summary is it just talks about how you can get to know each other as the participant, employer, and your direct care worker. And that will direct you back to the library, to the activities that I pointed out earlier, and where there's reflection, where you want to know yourself, because when you know yourself, then you can better recognize how people are different. And I think that's it.
Okay. Do you want to go back? What was the how we interact with people? Did you pop that one up before?
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to give you a really brief taste of one of those activities, right? Because it's not really complex. I mean, the whole point of this is, you know, Dawn talked through, we want to help people understand a little bit more about difference, a little bit more about the role of, you know, identity, but also we just want to give people some practical tools, things that they can do. They're like icebreakers. It's more activity. There's not a lot of heavy learning here. It's really experiential, and it's designed to be easy to access. And so this example here, how I interact with people, is something, it's a worksheet. There's a bunch of questions on it. It's something that, you know, if I'm a self-advocate and I've got a direct care worker, I could ask my care worker, hey, just take a couple minutes and answer these questions. And then maybe I'll do the same. And then we'll have a conversation about our answers, because it's a way to get to know each other. So, like, here's an example. Dawn talked about communication style. So one of the questions is, what style of communication do you use more often? Direct, you say exactly what you're thinking, or indirect, you choose your words carefully to avoid hurting other people's feelings or to avoid conflict. Not to reiterate what Dawn just said, but that's a really big one. You know, would anybody in here consider themselves a direct communicator? A little more? Well, I'm curious if anyone would share like what an experience that you have when you're communicating with somebody who doesn't have that style, or who maybe is off-put by your directness. Have you had that experience, like where you didn't intend to hurt somebody's feelings, but Anne? Yeah.
Try to talk it over, you try to work through it. It doesn't always go very well.
Yeah.
The more you talk, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Yeah. I was born and raised in Wisconsin, and about 5 years ago, I moved to Boston for several years, right? This is one way in which the culture was very different. All of a sudden, I was in the midst of the people who were very direct communicators. They were concise and to the point. They told you what was on their mind, and they didn't expect you to be offended by it. And I was like, wow! It was overwhelming at first, because people were just saying things, and I'm like, oh, I'm okay. But anyway, that's a good question, you know, that you can engage with somebody just as a way to get to know each other. How do you feel about asking questions when you don't understand something? That's a good one. So you're someplace and you're not quite sure. Do you stop and ask for directions, kind of thing? Like, you know, what's your style? How do you feel about asking questions when you don't understand something?
It can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I still do it, I'd say.
Yeah. So
Unless Google has the answer.
Well, that's a good point too. Like I do everything I can to find out so I don't have to ask. But again, really, you can imagine how in a caregiver employer relationship, that's kind of an important thing to know. If I'm an employer, I would like my direct care workers to be willing and able to ask me questions about things they're not sure of or they don't understand, especially if it involves, some direct support they're providing to me.
On that
Yeah, yeah.
same point, me being the client or I need to feel comfortable asking you what you're doing
Yeah.
and not getting, I'm doing my job. Why are you asking me what I'm doing? But because I've had that experience before of, well, can I ask what you're doing? And they're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think that another way that vulnerability as an employer can show up is if you are not inclined to be direct, if you're nervous if you're kind of unsure and don't feel safe, you're less likely to ask a question, and you can see how that could potentially be problematic, troublesome. Here's a good one. There's some questions about expressing emotions. One of them is, how do you show your own emotions, such as anger, happiness, and sadness? So think about that. What's your sort of emotional thing? And then I think the important other question is, how do you feel when other people show their emotions? How does that make you feel? How do you feel about other people showing their emotions? Are you having a reaction to that? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I work in hospital field and I see a lot. Usually I tell them instead of yelling, let's say we can talk, I can understand you better than yelling.
Yeah.
It usually help out, but sometimes like, depending on a person's ability, can misconfuse, yelling at them being angry, and that's how they react as, being frustrated or even happy. So it's just you have to get to know a person. I'm mothering a child that's autistic, and he talks very loud, and someone that don't know him would think he's yelling and screaming at him, but that's his regular talking tone, So I think in the sense of people actually understanding the different types of emotions. So like with me, when you were talking about the reaction, I was like, oh, I get that a lot sometimes when I speak with you can think I'm being aggressive, but that's just me. Like,
Yeah.
when I'm passionate about something,
Yeah.
it comes out different, than what other people are used to. And then like with you, when you said, and I'm sorry, I keep talking, when you was like, people be like, oh, I'm doing my job, can I do it? If somebody tells you that, just be like, explain what your job is.
Right.
Believe me, they'll let you know, because I'm like, that's kind of rude and disrespectful, telling people I'm doing my job. Like, well, explain your job duty. What are you doing now? Tell it step by step. Because I had to do that with my child. If he asked, no, explain to him step by step there now, like literally step by step. So if you're tying his shoe, explain each rabbit hole to him until you learn how to be respectful and understand that people have questions. I just think it's depending on the personality.
I love that.
I'm a type of person, you can yell and scream at me and I give you a blank face, like,
Yeah.
are you done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My girl was the same way, like every year. Like she don't trust me unless she's in the kitchen watching me cook. I was like, I can make rice. She's like, really? Read the instructions. I'm like, really? It's perfectly fine.
These are great. Yeah.
What everyone, like I tell people, I can't be around sensitive people because you're gonna cry every time I have something to say.
Yeah.
Well, you
Well,
have to have,
I love it.
you have to be strong-hearted. So that's the first thing I ask the person. Even when in my nursing field, I will be asking the nurse, y'all put this person on, so tell me about this person's personality. Do I gotta come in? Or can I be like, hey, how you doing? Let's get you changed today. Like,
Yeah.
it's just always, for me, it's always depending, but then that also goes with, like we said before, the person culture as well. Where they grew up at, because everybody culture base is different. It's not always the race, it's the area that they grew up in. Like in our household, we do more of our tradition, African traditions than our African Americans, or sometimes on certain days is our Chaitan tradition. But it depends on where you were born and the way that your parents have done your household traditions and culture base, because there's a different regular culture base, but there's also a home culture base as well. And then there's also one for school. So it depends on if you looking at the whole lifespans of that person and how you get to know them.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for all that. Some really terrific examples, I think, that illustrate what, you know, we believe to be true about differences and the importance of being curious and learning and recognizing when the way I show up might not be, you might not feel great to you, and vice versa, and adapting, like the notion of you recognizing that you, on your son's behalf, you may need to help people understand his method of communicating is not him yelling at you. And you are also, you know, like mindful of recognizing what other people might need in your work and having to figure that out and adjust or not. But but I think that's really the key thing that we're getting at. We think that the activities and the information that we have here can just really help for people who maybe aren't sure what to do, right? Like I'm somebody, I need support, but my life is really stressful. I'm worried, you know, I'm going day to day. I'm trying to manage my, you know, my workers or the support I get. So there's a lot of stressors in our life. And what we're trying to do is make it a little easier for people, just to make a little space for this relationship building stuff, for asking these questions and being curious and laughing and sharing. Even as you're taking care of business, right? Somebody's performing their jobs. I think there's lots of room and space to be relational if people begin to just to adopt some of the things that you just shared with us about how you see differences and the different ways that people communicate. Yes. Did you guys want to add anything to this? So this was just an example of one of the activities. You know, they're on there, like Dawn said, they're all PDFs. You can print them. They'll be in Spanish as well. You can do the audio version. They're not designed to be tests, or there's nothing formal about this. You just do whatever seems helpful and useful, right? And so I think for those of you who are, for example, maybe a family member or a service provider, iris consultant, family care team member, somebody who's in a position to support people who are employing direct care workers, I would love for you to think about how this might be useful, right? Look at it. Is there useful stuff? Are there people that you're supporting that you might sort of help to view it? Hey, check this out. If you're somebody who employs workers, would it be useful to have them, if you got a new worker, say, hey, little assignment for you, go take a little time when you get home and do this, go on the website or whatever. I think we are looking for feedback from the entire community about the best ways to use this, to use these materials. So our next step specifically, the website is up. You've got, as I said, there's these cards. Please feel free to take away. There's a QR code, and then the actual website is there. There are still a few links that aren't up yet. We're finishing all the translations and getting everything in place. But we encourage you to use it, to share it with anybody. It's available to anybody, any time of day. As Dawn mentioned, there will be opportunities for you to give feedback in each of the courses. But there's an email on here too. And if you got some feedback, just feel free to send us an email. I'd be happy to hear it. Suggestions about what works, what could be different. And I think, again, how could it be most useful? How can we get this in the hands, if you will, or within the worlds of the most people, so that it can really help people, build connections and have these better experiences with them. Yes, we are also, I don't know how long this will take, but we have, or will be applying with, what's the acronym? The yeah, the state's consumer or direct support training program that the UW Green Bay it's, I can't remember the acronym. Direct care support. Okay. So there is, yes, the state has sponsored and the UW Green Bay has put together this online course for direct care workers that leads to a certificate, and our course will be linked to that. They're going to be having a series of micro credentials, they call them, which are just shorter courses, online web-based courses that people can take and they can link to from this direct care worker site, and then get like what they call a little micro badge, a mini credential, you know. So we're trying to like get this in front of as many people as possible. We think it fills a gap. Like a lot of the training is really task-oriented, transactional. It's about how you do the job, all the mechanics, important stuff, right? But we felt like this relational building aspect of it is sort of under supported. You know, we sort of take it for granted. Sometimes we call them the soft skills, but I mean, I think they're really important skills. How do you be in relationship with people? How do you get to know people and work across difference? Other things? Let me just say real quickly, we created this thing with a grant that we got from the state of Wisconsin, the Medicaid program. And that grant ended last month. So the project is complete, but it's not really. I think the way we all view this is that it's just the beginning. We hope and we believe that it's sort of a nugget that can be valuable, but we also hope that it can continue to grow and that others will see it and maybe think of different ways to use it, or recognize, here's what you could add to this, or here's some different activities. So we really want to use our, In Control, we'll maintain this, keep it available. We'll do our best to update it, but we're really eager to get feedback and sort of partner with people. So if you know an organization or anyone that you think should take a look at this, please spread the word. Our desire is to put this out into the world and then keep it as healthy and growing as possible. So we invite you to partner with us in that regard. The more people that see it, the better it is, more feedback we'll get. Anything else? Questions, comments, thoughts about how you might use this? Yeah. Thank you. Just think about sharing it with somebody. Steph, who works at CLA, we showed it to Steph and some of her colleagues a while back, and there was a thought about like that first, or maybe the first two sessions, but certainly one about what it means, what's a direct care worker do. They thought, well, maybe when somebody applies for a direct care position, we acknowledge their application. When we send them, hey, why don't you take a look at this course, because it'll give you an idea of what you've just applied for, right? Am I capturing that? Yeah.
Whether it's small or maybe even the larger agencies that are well-known and have employees out there. But the smaller agencies, I find, they don't really have those orientation materials already developed. They also, maybe they have already got their workers, but then later experience some turnover. And now they're hiring new workers, which is something that they kind of built the business having people. And so I think the feedback that I've gotten is this is a nice resource for being able to hire new employees and get them as better prepared for what this job is about. And again, challenging those preconceived ideas about what the work is, or is this just a job? And not really. It's more than just a job, which is why I've taken.
Good call. Yeah. Questions, comments? Thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. And we, as I said, welcome any thoughts, any comments, any feedback, once you have a chance to look at the thing. But please do spread the word to anyone you think might be interested or find some value in it.
If you want to talk to me more, I'll be around.
Christy's around. She's going to be on the big stage tomorrow morning. All right. Thank you.